Hello, honeys, and welcome back to Beesness. We have once again a whole new lineup of headlines for you coming from the first week of May / the last little bit of April. A lot of stuff across the board going on, so let's dive right on in. One of the biggest headlines of the last week is that the Asian American Literature Festival announced that it will return, though this time without the Smithsonian. A bit of necessary background on this one. In 2023, the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, or the APAC, the curating and major funding power behind the biennial gathering, canceled it just a few weeks before the planned opening. Festival staff and outside organizing partners were reportedly most upset at the time by what they viewed as, quote, the changing rationale for the decision, end quote. They questioned whether potential cultural controversy concerns were the cause of that cancellation, but the Smithsonian denies any concerns of the sort. The Washington Post reports that the Smithsonian Secretary Alani G. Bunch III and Undersecretary of Museums and Culture Kevin Gover both said upon cancellation that, quote, they were exploring options for a virtual event in 2023 and a larger public event in 2024, but no further announcements were made, end quote. So this year in 2024, the event has been organized by a collective of literary groups without any relationship to the Smithsonian. Managing editor of Kaya Press and collective member Nalanjana Banerjee says, quote, what's so exciting is that this is coming out of what was destroyed by the Smithsonian last year, but also we've been drawing connections amongst ourselves, supporting each other and really thinking about what it means to collaborate, end quote. The biggest obstacle they anticipate facing is funding, as they have been unable to secure a comparable partner, and many are dipping into their own pockets to fund the goings-on. That being said, organizers expressed quite a bit of happiness with the freedom of the grassroots approach, the ability to go outside of DC, make their own choices on how things will operate, how things will look. And the result here is that the 2024 festival will take a hybrid format with some events online and some in person, hosted in many major cities, and some even to be hosted internationally in places like New Zealand and Australia. The lineup is to be announced, but this decentralized approach attempts to root the programs deeper in each city's particular art scene. Quote, partnering with institutions ranging from new Asian American bookstores to long-running open mics, end quote. Though some organizers expressed hopes that in future years the festival will be able to take place in one site yet again, many are still excited for the 2024 format. Major buzz was stirred up by the announcement that Paul McCartney's rarely seen photography is scheduled to get a big show at the Brooklyn Museum in New York. Despite being a press favorite at the height of Beatlemania upon his arrival to New York City in the early 60s, McCartney also did his own photography using a Pentax 35mm film camera. This year, McCartney will return to New York to show these pictures in Paul McCartney Photographs 1963-64, Eyes of the Storm. Art news writers say that it aims to, quote, provide an intimate glimpse into what life was like on and off the stage as a member of one of music's most influential bands, end quote. It first opened to great success at the National Portrait Gallery in London, and its run at the Brooklyn Museum will go from May 3rd through August 18th. McCartney and his personal photo curator, Sarah Brown, together chose about 280 works for inclusion in the show. The superstar was especially conscientiously selecting photos that, quote, create a visual timeline that highlights the Beatles' extraordinary rise to superstardom between 1963 and 64, end quote. The museum curator behind this show, Catherine Futter, describes McCartney's level of involvement in the exhibition as nothing short of a testament to his artistic versatility, saying that while he is often siloed into being seen as a purely musical artist, he absolutely has a visual aesthetic and great eye. Airbnb has also launched its new Icons series by listing a house that replicates the one from the movie Up down to the detail. Launched on May 1st, the planned Icons series will include 11 special locations, some of which will become available later this year. From the photographs, the detail of this dwelling is insane. It includes Carl's cane, the couple's armchairs, and more. It comes complete with 8,000 balloons attached to the top of it and a crane that lifts the home off the ground. The immersive feel of the rental is intentional. Airbnb co-founder and CEO Brian Chesky said in a statement quoted by ABC 7 News, "Icons takes you inside worlds that only existed in your imagination until now. As life becomes increasingly digital, we're focused on bringing more magic into the real world," end quote. This rental is located amongst the red rocks of Abiquiu, New Mexico, though more that are either existing or yet to come include Marvel's X-Men mansion from the franchise in Westchester, New York, Prince's Purple Rain House in Minneapolis, and Kevin Hart's pop-up Caramino Live Lounge. The funny thing about renting these icons, though, is that you literally need a golden ticket. According to ABC 7 News, quote, Airbnb customers can request to book icons, which are free or under $100, but listings are limited to lucky guests who are chosen to receive one of over 4,000 digital golden tickets, end quote. No ticket, no booking. As heartwarming as it is to see that one could potentially stay in the Up House, I mean, what an homage to childhood, the more shocking listing to come yet in this Icon series, the one that, I kind of care about the most, is the Musée d'Orsay. This inclusion is somewhat shocking because the Musée is known as one of the most forward-thinking, prestigious, and iconic art galleries in Paris. It's known especially for its Impressionist and post-Impressionist impressive collections. One lucky enough to book this experience can expect to be hosted by Mathieu Lehauner, the acclaimed designer who created this year's Olympic torch. In addition to such treats as a private tour of the museum's collections before a gourmet dinner, the stay in the iconic clock room transformed into a luxury bedroom suite, and the listing even makes it a point to note that one could enjoy the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympic Games taking place on July 26th because bookings open Tuesday, May 21st. Universal Studios also announced that it would have Andrew Hai direct its new Leonardo da Vinci film. Hai gained name recognition with his work on All of Us Strangers, Searchlight's queer romantic fantasy starring Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal, which netted 6 BAFTA nominations plus 3 more at the Independent Spirits. He will write and direct the film about the famous impressionist based on Walter Isaacson's best-selling 2017 biography of the artist, itself based on thousands of pages from Da Vinci's notebooks and new discoveries about his life and work, aiming to reconcile the artist with the scientist to show that he mastered lots of skills that anyone can improve. And that little bit right there is what caught my attention about this announcement in particular, that the film will focus on the accessibility of arts if one just dedicates time to them. The Da Vinci film will be Universal's second adaptation of an Isaacson property. The first was an adaptation of his 2011 biography, Steve Jobs, which starred Michael Fassbender on the silver screen. New Yorkers were delighted to see last week that an enormous hot dog took up residence in the middle of Times Square. A 65-foot-long hot dog in a bun drenched in mustard statue, simply called hot dog in the city, launches confetti into the air every day at noon. It was made by Brooklyn-based artists Jen Catron and Paul Outlaw, who were commissioned by Times Square Arts for the piece. Time Out says the artists, quote, hope the sculpture will entice folks to talk about the patriarchy of meat eating, what meat production in the U.S. entails, the politics of street vending, capitalism, immigration, and more, end quote. With these themes in mind, the dog's debut itself was a kickoff for associated events such as condiment debates, a national dog eating qualification contest, and more. However, you're going to have to get over there if you want to see this thing yourself. It is only on display until June 13th. In a follow-up to one of our previous Beesness stories, remember when we first talked about the implementation of the world's first graffiti-removing drones in Washington state? Well, as of last Wednesday, that program is active. You'll recall that, as KPTV puts it, quote, the Washington State Department of Transportation says that graffiti removal is a challenge, but they also say it puts their crews at risk. Crews also say graffiti will sometimes reappear hours after it's been covered up, end quote. And yet, so very soon after its start, the program has hit its first snag. KPTV, as well as Interesting Engineering Online magazine, both say that the drones currently are only being tested in the Tacoma and Olympia areas, possibly because a full rollout of the drones could be difficult. They point to existing laws as the source of this difficulty, saying, quote, drones are only allowed to be flown by licensed operators, and they can't be used over active lanes of traffic, meaning the areas where they are used have to be temporarily closed off, end quote. There's still lots of hush-hush over how the program is going so far, but complete reports, which are due in December of this year, will show if the program is successful enough by yet unnamed metrics to continue. And to close things out, one more follow-up. A European court has officially ruled that Italy is the rightful owner of a bronze statue currently housed in the Getty Museum. According to a ruling by the European Court of Human Rights on Thursday, Italy has the right to confiscate a life-size bronze statue dating back to the 2nd or 3rd centuries BCE from the J. Paul Getty Villa Museum in LA. Italy is extremely excited about the ruling, as this particular bronze has been central to their reclamation efforts in the last several years. The statue itself was created in Greece around 300 to 100 BCE and is attributed to celebrated sculptor Lysippos. So, according to Italy's Cultural Heritage Ministry, it's one of the most important examples of ancient Greek art from the classical era. An important note, the reason I keep referring to it as a bronze or a statue is that even the name of this thing is contended. It's known in Italy, for example, as the Athlete of Fano, but the Getty Museum refers to it as both the Getty Bronze and the Victorious Youth. So a recap of the story of this bronze. It was first found at the bottom of the Adriatic Sea by fishermen in 1964. And then, according to court documents, Italian officials claim it was stolen and smuggled out of the country before being eventually sold to the Getty Museum for around $4 million in 1978. Art News reports the court as saying that the Getty knew that Italian officials were attempting to get it back even before they acquired it, and their ruling reflected that by stating, in part, quote, owing in particular to the Getty Trust's negligence or bad faith in purchasing the statue despite being aware of the claims of the Italian state and their efforts to recover it, the confiscation order had been proportionate to the aim of ensuring the return of an object that was part of Italy's cultural heritage, end quote. This very weighted ruling came after the Getty Museum asked the European Court of Human Rights to overrule a 2018 Italian court decree that the statue should be confiscated and returned to Italy. Obviously, this did not go the way they expected it to. Of course, the ruling was very divisive. Maurizio Fiorelli, an Italian government attorney, said, quote, "This is not just a victory for the Italian government, it's a victory for culture," end quote. Whereas the Getty statement reads in part that they find the confiscation of the object that had been in their possession for nearly 50 years and not created by an Italian artist nor found within Italian territory is appropriate or legal or even ethical. That is actually somewhat of an interesting point, given that there is no information available, even by art news researchers, on whether Greece has ever made claims on the bronze. We're talking about this, of course, because it is a follow-up to a previous Beesness story, but also because it's a fascinating kind of difference in legal reality versus reality. Though the ruling is pretty absolute, especially in its wording, the next steps are unclear. Because the USA is not party to the European courts, its rulings are not binding. Maybe in anticipation of this, Italy, back in 2019, asked the U.S. Attorney's General Office to enforce the confiscation order, but the ECHR says that enforcement is still pending. Patty Gerstenblith, an expert in cultural heritage law at DePaul University, told the Associated Press, quote, "If the U.S. court were to enforce the judgment, then it's going to open a huge can of worms for American museums," end quote. This is because it could set many other museums in the U.S. up for similar claims, rulings, orders from foreign courts and legal bodies. All right, honeys, that is it for the week. I hope you've enjoyed your Beesness. Feel free to double check any of our stories for more info or for proof that I know how to be an academic. I will talk to you all next week when we drop a new, not only Beesness, but also chapter of Art That Pisses People Off. In the meantime, have a great weekend. Take care of yourselves. This podcast was created, produced, written, posted, edited, and fact-checked by Master's graduate Celia Bugno. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on all of your favorite streaming platforms as well as your social medias.